Black CEO stopped at his own mansion gate minutes. Later, he replaced the whole security team. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Cry, baby! The words cracked through the morning like glass breaking on marble. 9:12 a.m. The sun climbed over Ward Estate's black iron gates, its light glinting off the mirrored lenses of 3 laughing security guards. In front of them stood Elijah Ward, 6'4", broad shoulders, gray sleeveless shirt, calm as concrete. He didn't move, didn't blink. Only the muscle in his jaw shifted once, slow and deliberate. The woman yelling was their supervisor. Blonde hair, tight beige dress, voice sharp enough to slice the air. This neighborhood doesn't need more trespassers pretending they live here, she spat, jabbing a manicured finger toward his chest. The guards behind her chuckled louder, one doubling over, another wiping his eyes. Elijah's Rolls-Royce idled quietly by the curb, engine low, like it knew how wrong this was. He'd landed from Dubai less than an hour ago, no entourage, no chauffeur, just the man who built a billion-dollar empire and the house that empire paid for. He'd come home to surprise his son, but what greeted him wasn't family. It was disbelief wearing a uniform. "Sir," one guard said between laughs, "deliveries go around back." Elijah's voice came out low, almost kind. "Run the name." The laughter stalled for half a second. Then the supervisor scoffed. "Oh, please. I've seen enough fake IDs this month to know a scam when I smell one." She gestured to the others. "Take a picture of his license plate. We'll call the cops." Phones came up. Shutters clicked. Elijah didn't move. His eyes followed the lens steady, unreadable. Inside that stillness, something simmered. From across the hedge, a gardener looked up, brow furrowed. He knew that face. It was the same man from the framed photo in the estate's security office. He hesitated, thumb hovering over his phone's record button. "Don't just stand there," the woman snapped. "Say something, big man, or are you going to cry like the rest of them?" Elijah tilted his head slightly. "Is that how you talk to homeowners?" That earned another laugh. "Homeowners?" she smirked. "Not dressed like that." For a moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The gate loomed behind him, tall, silent, indifferent, a line between power and prejudice. He looked past her, toward the security booth, where a digital panel blinked quietly with the estate's insignia. W. His voice softened but didn't lose its edge. "One more time. Run the name." "Not a chance," she said. "You people always think you can bluff your way in." Those words "you people" hit harder than any shove could. Elijah exhaled slowly. A soundless decision formed behind his calm. He reached for his phone. One swipe, one call. "Renee," he said, voice steady. "Activate Delta Protocol, North Gate." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. Because the moment he ended that call, everything at Ward Estate began to change, and the people laughing were about to learn who they had just humiliated. The phone call ended. Silence didn't. For a heartbeat, the air around the gate hung still, then a low mechanical hum rolled from the security booth. The digital panel that had blinked idly moments ago began flashing red, then white. What's that?" one guard muttered. The supervisor scoffed. "System glitch. Happens all the time." But Elijah didn't answer. He was watching, the way a storm watches a match. Inside the booth, a camera lens rotated toward him, scanning. A faint chime rang out, "Access pending. Verifying biometric signature." "What the hell?" the second guard said, lowering his phone. The blonde woman stepped forward again, trying to reclaim her ground. "Don't move," she barked. "You're trespassing on private property." Elijah's voice was even, surgical. "Am I?" The scanner beeped again. "Access verified." The gate lights flickered green. All 3 guards froze. The woman forced a laugh. "That can't be right. Our system's offline." No," Elijah said, eyes on her. Yours is. Her radio crackled then. Unit North Gate, stand by. Owner confirmation received. Repeat, owner confirmation received. The words hit like a verdict. The guards looked at each other, mouths half open, trying to calculate how badly they'd just misread everything. One dropped his phone. Another instinctively straightened his vest. Elijah stepped closer, the morning light cutting sharp lines across his face. You wanted proof, he said softly. Now you're standing in it. Behind him, the gardener finally stopped recording. He lowered the phone, whispering, "He's the owner." The blonde woman's voice cracked. "That's impossible," your ID said. "My ID?" Elijah lifted the badge they'd thrown on the ground, dusted it off, and held it up to the camera overhead. "You mean this one?" The gate clicked. Slowly, majestically, it began to open inward. The sound wasn't mechanical anymore, it was judgment made audible. Elijah didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "You've guarded this gate long enough. Step aside." Before we continue, tell me this: if someone disrespected you at your own home, would you walk away or walk through? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Elijah was about to do both, walk through, and make sure no one like them ever stood there again. The gate finished opening with a low metallic sigh. For a second, no one moved. The three guards stood still, faces drained of color, the morning sun now exposing every flicker of disbelief they had left. The woman who had shouted "crybaby" tried to fix her tone, reaching for a smile that wouldn't come. "Sir, this is just a misunderstanding." Elijah stepped forward, slow, measured, boots quiet on the stone. "No," he said, "this is a mirror, and you finally get to see yourselves." Her lips parted, no sound came out. From behind, the gardener who'd recorded earlier whispered, "They're done," to himself, almost in awe. Elijah turned toward the booth. "Renee," he said through his earpiece, calm as ever, "replace Northgate personnel, effective immediately." Her voice returned within seconds, efficient and clear. "Confirmed. New team en route. Estimated arrival 2 minutes." The woman blinked. "Replace?" "Yes," Elijah replied. "You've been guarding my home, not protecting it. There's a difference." "Oh." Down the road, the hum of engines approached black SUVs, no logos, tinted windows. The guards shifted uneasily as the vehicles rolled to a stop in perfect formation. 6 uniformed security officers stepped out. Identical suits, quiet authority radiating off them. The lead officer nodded once to Elijah. "Mr. Ward, authorization received." Elijah gestured toward the stunned trio. "Escort them off property. Non-violent removal." The blonde woman's voice broke into pleading. "We didn't know. You didn't say who you were." Elijah looked at her, eyes steady but not cruel. "I didn't have to. Respect isn't earned by introductions." The words hung heavy, filling the space where laughter had been. One guard tried to protest, muttering something about protocols, but the new officers were already guiding them toward the SUVs. The gates, those same iron bars they'd guarded, closed softly behind them, sealing their exit with a sound like finality. Elijah exhaled once, the way a man does when he's not angry anymore, just done. He turned to the gardener still standing by the hedge. "Keep recording?" he asked. The young man hesitated. "Not anymore, sir. Everyone's seen enough." Elijah nodded, half smiled. "Good." He looked back at the gate, at the place that had tried to reject him, and said the words that would live far beyond that driveway. "You guarded a gate so hard, you forgot what dignity looks like." Then he walked inside. By the time the new guards had settled at their posts, the sun had shifted, painting the mansion's front courtyard in gold. The SUVs were gone. The laughter was gone. Only the echo of it remained, faint and hollow, like an old recording that no longer mattered. Elijah walked the path lined with white stones and trimmed hedges. The morning breeze carried the sound of distant birds, soft, almost apologetic. Inside the marble foyer, everything was still. A house can feel different after injustice has touched its gates, quieter, heavier, but somehow more honest. He paused by the mirror near the entrance, the same one he'd installed years ago for guests to check themselves before walking into his home. His reflection looked back, composed, unbothered, but there was something behind the calm, that old ache every black man with power still carried somewhere between pride and exhaustion. He remembered being 24, turned away from an apartment he could afford, told the place was already taken. Remembered standing outside, promising himself he'd build something they couldn't gatekeep. And now, decades later, it had happened again, only this time, he owned the gate. He didn't need cameras. He didn't need revenge. He needed reform. Elijah tapped his phone once more. "Renee," he said, "install new training protocols. Every contractor who works this estate gets bias orientation, no exceptions." "Understood," she replied. He ended the call and stood there, listening to the silence that followed, not empty, but earned. From outside, the gardener's voice floated faintly over the courtyard. "That's how you handle power." Elijah smiled, not proud, not smug, just peaceful. He stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the front gate. The same sun that had witnessed his humiliation now lit the iron bars with quiet grace. Justice didn't always shout. Sometimes it just stood tall and breathed. He spoke softly, to no one, and to everyone. Power isn't how loud you can speak, it's how calmly you correct what's wrong. The camera would pull back now, slow, cinematic, revealing the entire ward estate, gleaming beneath the morning light. The new guards at attention, the old gone for good. And as his voice faded, the narration would close. You don't need to film dignity to prove it exists. You just have to live it loud enough that silence can't deny it. Before we go, let me ask you, have you ever been stopped at a place you built? Tell your story below, because someone out there needs to hear it. Fade out. By noon, the clip had already made it online. Not by Elijah, he never posted, but by the gardener, Miguel, who couldn't keep it to himself. "Black CEO stopped at his own gate," the caption read. No hashtags, no filters, just truth. Within hours, it spread. Millions watched a calm man stand before arrogance and dismantle it without rage, without a single curse word. Comments flooded in from Johannesburg to Toronto, from Atlanta to London. People didn't just see a man, they saw themselves. A woman from D.C. wrote, "He didn't raise his voice once. That's the kind of power they can't steal." Another replied, "Imagine guarding a gate and not knowing who built it." Even news anchors picked it up. They called it the Quiet Rebellion. A morning host said, "This wasn't just about one man and his house. It's about how we see ownership and who we believe deserves it." Meanwhile, Elijah stayed silent. He never commented, never corrected a headline. The video wasn't his justice, it was the world's reminder. Inside Ward Holdings headquarters the next morning, the boardroom screens glowed with media headlines. Renee stood beside him, tablet in hand. "It's everywhere, sir," she said softly. "People are calling it a masterclass in restraint." Elijah simply nodded. Restraint isn't silence. It's choosing when truth speaks for you. He turned toward the window, looking out over the city, a skyline he'd helped design, contracts he'd signed, jobs he'd created. The same world that once doubted him now ran on the foundation of his decisions. Still, he wasn't smiling. Justice, for him, was never entertainment. It was architecture built brick by brick, through patience and clarity. Downstairs, a janitor polishing the marble floor whispered to another, "That's him, the one from the video." The second man smiled. "Good. Means there's still men like him around." Outside, new guards stood at the estate gate, respectful, alert, professional. They didn't stare, didn't smirk. They greeted every car the same way. That, more than any headline, was the proof Elijah wanted. He knew this wouldn't be the last misunderstanding. But maybe it would be the last time silence felt like defeat. As he walked past the ward crest mounted on the wall, he murmured a line that wasn't meant for the cameras, but for every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. They can build fences around your name, but not around your worth. Ugh. The scene would fade to black, the faint hum of city traffic replacing applause, because some victories don't need noise. They just need witnesses. City skyline at dusk, headlines fading in and out on glass screens. The mansion incident, CEO rewrites security culture. When calm becomes a weapon. The world had moved fast, but Elijah stayed still. He sat in his office long after the lights dimmed, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, the skyline reflected in his windows like a map of everything he'd fought for. On the desk lay a single framed photo, his son at 10, standing beside that same gate years earlier, grinning wide, no fear in his eyes then. He smiled faintly. That was why it mattered. Not the property, not the headlines, but the lesson. That dignity, once seen, reshapes the way children look at themselves. The news anchor's voice played softly on a muted screen. Viewers worldwide call it the Quiet Rebellion. a moment where silence spoke louder than outrage. Renee entered quietly. "Security protocols have been updated across all divisions," she said. "We've added an ethics clause. Every contractor signs it before they start." "Good," Elijah replied. "Don't let it be a moment. Make it a model." "Yeah." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever wish you had shouted back?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "No, because if I had shouted, they'd remember the noise, not the message." Cut to a montage of people across the world, a black woman at a hotel desk refusing to be talked down to, a teenager defending a classmate, a manager correcting a biased policy meeting. Quiet actions, loud impact. Voiceover, Elijah's tone measured, grounded. Every gate has a story. Every uniform carries a choice. And every time someone stands calm against chaos, the world tilts a little closer to balance. The screen cuts to Miguel, the gardener, sitting at a diner watching the viral clip on his phone. A waitress leans over, eyes wide. "That's your boss?" Miguel nods. "Yeah, but that's not why I filmed it." "Then why?" He smiles. "Because someday my kid's gonna need to see what power really looks like." Back to Elijah, he rises, crosses to the window. The city glows alive, imperfect, still worth saving. He whispers to the glass, a private promise to whoever might need it next. Justice doesn't need volume, it just needs vision. Music swells low, orchestral, cinematic. Camera pulls back through the window, rising above the skyline until the mansion lights below are just a pulse in the dark. Final fade in. The Quiet Rebellion, a Black Tseo story. Number Dignity has no gate. Fade to black. Morning light returned to Ward Estate the next day, softer now, like the world itself had taken a breath. The new guards stood at attention, quiet, respectful. The air carried no tension, only discipline. Inside the mansion, Elijah brewed his own coffee, no assistance, no rush. Steam rose from the cup in slow curls, catching the sunlight as he looked out the wide window toward the gate. From that distance, it looked small, just metal and shadow. Yet yesterday, that same gate had held centuries of weight, suspicion, pride, ignorance. He took a sip, then set the cup down. The news still played in the background. Panels debated professionalism under pressure, think pieces about bias in private security, politicians quoting him out of context. But Elijah barely listened. For him, the story was already over. He wasn't angry that they doubted him. He was disappointed that the world still needed proof. Outside, a delivery truck stopped by the new guardhouse. The driver, an older man, brown-skinned, cautious, handed over a package. The head of security scanned it, then smiled. "All clear. Have a good day, sir." No sneer, no suspicion, just respect. Elijah watched that small moment through the window, and something inside him eased. That was the real victory, the quiet correction of habits, not headlines. His phone buzzed. A message from Renee. "Board wants to feature The Quiet Rebellion in our diversity initiative." He replied, "No press, just policy." Then another message from an unknown number. It read, "I was one of the guards. I deserved what happened. But thank you for not yelling." Elijah read it twice, then typed only 2 words back. "Learn forward." He closed the phone and stepped outside. The morning air smelled of fresh-cut grass and second chances. The gardener, Miguel, waved from the side path. "Morning, Mr. Ward." "Morning," Elijah replied. "How's your family?" "Good, sir. My daughter saw the video. She said she wants to work for you one day." Elijah smiled. "Tell her to aim higher." They both laughed, not loud, not awkward, just human. He turned once more toward the gate, the same one that had humiliated him 24 hours earlier. It stood open now, sunlight spilling through the bars. He whispered, mostly to himself, "Every door that tried to block you teaches you how to build your own." And for the first time in a long while, he didn't just feel powerful. He felt free. Cut to black. Gentle piano fades. 3 days later, the video had found its way into classrooms, offices, and dinner tables. It wasn't just trending, it was teaching. At a university in Atlanta, a sociology professor replayed the clip for his students. "Notice," he said, pausing the frame where Elijah stood still, surrounded by guards. "This," he pointed, "is controlled power, the kind that doesn't need to shout to rearrange a room." A student in the back raised her hand. "So, silence is protest?" The professor smiled. Silence with intent is revolution. Across the ocean in Lagos, a young entrepreneur watched the clip on his cracked phone while waiting in line at immigration. He whispered under his breath, "One day, they'll stop asking who I work for and start asking what I built." In New York, a news anchor read viewer letters on air. One from a retired police officer said, "After 30 years in uniform, I learned something from that man. Control isn't weakness, it's wisdom." The story rippled further hashtags translated into Swahili, Spanish, Vietnamese. Quiet power. Dignity has no gate. People used them to share their own experiences, denied access, misjudged worth, small humiliations they'd once let slide. Now, they wrote back. Miguel, the gardener, became an accidental voice of reason online. When reporters asked why he filmed it, he said, "Because someone had to remind them that respect doesn't check skin tone before duty." His words traveled further than he expected. Back at Ward Holdings, Renee received messages from security firms across the country asking to license the new training program Elijah had designed overnight. She showed him the requests. He shook his head gently. "It's not a product, it's a principle." One headline read, "The Man Who Redefined Calm." Elijah refused interviews. His only statement was a single post on the company site. "We correct systems, not people. But sometimes, correction starts with one mistake you refuse to repeat." That sentence alone gathered over 1 million shares in 24 hours. And somewhere, in a small suburban security office, a new recruit watched the same video before his first shift. He adjusted his badge, straightened his posture, and whispered, "Not on my watch." Because by then, the quiet rebellion wasn't just a story. It had become a manual, a reminder that every gatekeeper holds a choice, to block power or to recognize it. Fade to montage. Faces watching the clip across continents. Eyes bright with reflection. Soft piano swells. By the end of the week, admiration had met its shadow. The same headlines that once called Elijah a symbol of restraint now asked, was the quiet rebellion staged? Morning talk shows filled their panels with skepticism. Journalists dissecting frame by frame, searching for what they called corporate PR fingerprints. "He owns media interests, doesn't he?" one host said. "You really think this wasn't strategic?" Another replied, "Maybe it doesn't matter. Even if it was, people needed to see it." The argument split timelines in half. Some saw him as a hero. Others accused him of manufacturing dignity for clicks. Hashtags turned from unity to debate. Number silent power versus number silent performance. On one podcast, a guest sneered, "If it were real, he'd have pressed charges." A caller shot back instantly, "Maybe he didn't need to. Maybe that's what real power looks like." Elijah didn't answer any of them. At Ward Holdings, PR executives urged him to release a statement. "Just clarify, sir," one said. "Set the record straight. We can prove it wasn't staged." But Elijah only smiled faintly. Let noise prove itself. Truth doesn't need an audience. Still, the noise grew louder. Memes mocked the guards. Conspiracy videos claimed the mansion wasn't his. Cable networks aired debates titled, "The Myth of the Calm Black CEO." Renee scrolled through the chaos, jaw tight. "They're twisting it," she said, turning grace into performance. Elijah's response was simple. "Then let them. You can't argue someone into understanding dignity." Outside, cameras began parking across the street, waiting for a statement he'd never give. He walked past them each morning, no sunglasses, no entourage, and every time, someone shouted, "Mr. Ward, was it real?" He'd look up, meet their eyes, and answer softly, "What part of it do you hope wasn't?" That line went viral again because calmness in a storm always confuses those who profit from noise. Inside his home, the air stayed clean, quiet, unbothered. The new guards still greeted every visitor with the same tone. Miguel kept tending the garden. The gates remained open in the daytime, not as a show of wealth, but as proof that transparency could protect itself. At night, Elijah stood on the balcony, city lights blinking below like restless eyes. He whispered to himself, "Let them doubt. Even the truth needs friction to shine." The camera panned back distant voices of anchors fading beneath a steady hum of wind. And in that hush between applause and accusation, the story steadied again exactly where it began. At a gate, and a man who refused to raise his voice to be heard. Fade out, low strings swell. 2 weeks later, Elijah Ward didn't hold a press conference. He held a breakfast. No podiums, no cameras, Just 20 young interns from across his company, men and women who looked like the people the world too often underestimated. They sat in a sunlit conference room, plates half full, eyes wide, waiting for him to speak. He didn't start with the mansion. He started with a question. "How many of you," he asked quietly, "have ever been told you didn't belong?" Almost every hand rose. He nodded once, slowly. "Good. Then you know what to build against." They leaned forward as he continued, voice measured, grounded. What happened at that gate wasn't about anger. It was about architecture. Every system that blocks us was designed, so we design better ones. That's what leaders do. On the table sat a single folder stamped Ward Initiative Open Gates Program. Inside, a plan for scholarships, leadership, mentorship, and a certification program for security and hospitality staff, nationwide training to detect bias before it becomes harm. "This isn't charity," Elijah said. "It's correction." Renee, standing near the window, added, "We'll launch it next quarter. He's funding the first 10,000 participants personally." One intern whispered, "You're turning your story into a system." Elijah smiled. "Exactly. Systems change faster than sympathy." Outside the tower, protesters had gathered not against him, but for him. Signs read, "Dignity has no gate," and "Teach respect, not reaction." He didn't wave from the window, he just looked at them, proud but cautious. He knew movements could turn into noise if they forgot their purpose. Later that day, when reporters finally cornered him outside the building, microphones flashing, one shouted, "Mr. Ward, is this your revenge?" He paused before getting into his car, eyes calm. "No," he said, "this is my response." That quote aired everywhere within the hour. But the real headline was the foundation announcement. Ward Initiative commits $20 million to equality training. Across the city, a mural appeared overnight, Elijah's silhouette beside the words, "You don't have to yell to change the world." Back home, the mansion gate stood open, framed by light. Miguel trimmed the hedges while his daughter painted small flowers along the stone path. She asked him, "Daddy, who's the man in the picture?" Miguel smiled. "The reason you'll never have to prove where you belong." And as dusk fell, the camera lifted above the estate once more, the same iron gate now glowing under the evening sun, transformed from barrier to beacon. Because justice, when it's real, doesn't end at a fence. It opens one. Fade to black. Piano resolves into silence. Months passed. The noise faded, but the impact didn't. In cities Elijah had never visited, walls now carried the words, "Open Gates." The phrase had become more than a slogan, it was a curriculum. Universities taught the quiet rebellion in leadership courses. Corporations added his calm footage to ethics training. The same moment that began with humiliation had become a blueprint for grace under pressure. But Elijah kept living quietly. He never chased the spotlight that tried to follow him. Most mornings, he still brewed his own coffee and walked the perimeter of his estate not to inspect, but to remember. One afternoon, his son Marcus returned from college. Taller now, sharp-eyed, carrying that mixture of pride and question only young men have. They stood by the same gate that had once framed the world's judgment. "Dad," Marcus said, "why didn't you sue them?" Elijah smiled. "Because I didn't need money. I needed meaning." Marcus frowned. "But they embarrassed you." "Ugh." "They educated themselves," Elijah replied. "That's more lasting than punishment." For a moment, neither spoke. The breeze moved through the hedges, carrying the faint hum of life beyond the estate. Marcus glanced up at the security camera mounted above. "People still talk about that video," he said. "Some call it the day you taught America how to breathe." Elijah chuckled softly. "No, I just reminded them we still could." "Oh." He handed Marcus a small brass key, the original master key to the estate gate. "Keep this," he said. "Not for what it opens, but for what it taught." Marcus turned the key over in his hand, its weight symbolic, real. From the distance, Miguel's daughter, now in her teens, waved as she passed on her bike. The world had grown forward quietly, just as Elijah hoped it would. In downtown billboards, his foundation's logo flickered beside new faces, young leaders, interns, reformers, each carrying their own version of the calm revolution he'd begun. And across continents, people still whispered that same line he'd once said beneath his breath. Respect isn't earned by introductions. At sunset, Elijah stood on his balcony again, eyes on the horizon that had witnessed everything: his rise, his restraint, his redemption. He whispered to no one and to everyone. If silence built the wall, then dignity will be the one to tear it down. The sky glowed amber, the city alive below, and for the first time, his legacy no longer needed to speak. It was already echoing in the lives it had opened. Camera pulls back. Strings and piano merge into light. Fade out. The screen opens on a familiar image. The gate. But this time, there are no guards. No raised voices. No tension waiting to ignite. Just a quiet stretch of morning light sliding across iron and stone. Birds perch where laughter once echoed cruelly. The air is calm, earned calm. Elijah stands at the threshold, no longer watched, no longer judged. A man in a moment that learned to outlive noise. He runs his hand across the gate's metal bars, the same ones that had once denied him entry, and smiles faintly. The voiceover begins low, measured, deliberate. Every story has a door. Some we open with keys, others with courage. Cut to clips from the world, security guards greeting guests with respect, students quoting his words in classrooms, Miguel's daughter presenting a school essay titled, "The Day the Gate Opened." Her voice, bright and certain, overlays the footage. He didn't fight the way they expected. He taught them what power sounds like when it whispers. The music swells softly piano, strings, heartbeat tempo. Elijah steps beyond the gate, walking down the road lined with maple trees. He doesn't look back. The gate closes behind him, slow and dignified. But this time, the sound isn't cold metal. It's resolution. Renee's voice comes through on his earpiece. Board confirmed, the new training has reached 10,000 employees worldwide. Elijah smiles. 10,000 open gates. She pauses. What do we call the next phase? He glances at the horizon. The future doesn't need a name, he says. It just needs people brave enough to walk through it. Cut to montage. Faces of people in airports, hotels, offices, every one of them, pausing before a doorway, holding it open for the next person. No dialogue, just motion. Voiceover final. Once, a man was stopped at his own gate. Minutes later, he replaced those who guarded it. Years later, he replaced what built them. The real victory isn't entry, it's evolution. Oh, the camera rises, the estate becomes a dot, then a shimmer, then nothing but light. One last frame fades in. To everyone who was ever told they didn't belong, build your own door and keep it open. Then silence. The screen turns black. Two words appear, centered, glowing softly. The quiet, rebellion. Underneath, a final whisper. Number dignity has no gate.